when land managers are working on ecosystem restorations, they tend to focus on the vegetative community because that's the easiest to physically restore, both in terms of removing unwanted vegetation and adding in wanted vegetation. However, that is not the whole picture. So when we think about land restoration, we need to include other organismal groups in our concept of what a healthy restored ecosystem looks like. One way to do that is by using a functional trait perspective. And functional traits are characteristics of organisms that allow them to interact with their environment and perform certain ecosystem functions. Ecosystem functions of the dung beetle groups that I'm looking at include decomposition, nutrient cycling, and soil rotation. And some of the functional traits that allow them to perform these functions include things like body size, which I'm measuring using dry biomass, and also some other morphological traits, and also behavioral functional traits, like behavioral guilds which they belong. My research has two primary objectives. The first being to determine how restoration management techniques might change the dung beetle community, both in terms of species composition and abundance. And my second objective is to measure how the ecosystem function of dung decomposition may be related to the restoration management techniques and also to the resulting dung beetle communities. So the study system I'm working in is the tallgrass prairie, which is an ecosystem that once stretched over a good portion of the Midwestern United States and Canada, but has since been reduced to a very small fraction of its original range, including less than 1% of the original prairie left in the state of Illinois, where I'm doing my research. When land managers are working to restore tallgrass prairie, they employ a wide variety of techniques, most notably using prescribed fire to reduce unwanted and invasive vegetation, and also the reintroduction of large grazing herbivores like the American bison. In addition to these restoration management techniques, I'm also interested in seeing how the communities in restored sites change as the sites age. The youngest sites I'm including in my research are 3 or 4 years into the restoration process. My oldest restored sites are 20 to 30 years old, and I'm also including consideration of 2 remnant sites that were never plowed under for agriculture and have remained original prairie. More specifically, I'm doing my research at the Natualist grasslands, which is a restored prairie administered by the Illinois Nature Conservancy. And as you can see from the map, it's a rather large site, so I've decided to include just 20 sites from the restorations in my research. The 2 sites indicated in the red are the 2 remnant prairies. This one has access to the bison grazing, and this one does not have bison on it. The blue sites are the other areas where the bison are able to graze, and they are all restorations. And then the yellow sites are all restorations that do not have bison on them. So my field work consisted of 2 main parts. The first was a series of pitfall traps. So in each of the 20 sites, I set 2 pitfall traps baited with fresh bison dung, and then also 8 unbaited pitfall traps for a total of 10 in each site. They were open for a 4-week session in May and June, and I'll be sharing with you a portion of the results from that first sampling session. We also had the traps open again in July and again in September in order for us to have a full and complete picture of the entire summer season of the dung beetle community. The second portion of my field work was a decomposition study. So we scooped fresh bison poop and placed it on these wire platforms you see here. So there were 12 of these pats of dung in each of the 20 sites, and they were set out in May and June to run concurrently with the first pitfall trapping session. We weighed the dung pats at 5, 8, 11, and 15 days to track their decomposition over time as it related to just general decomposition and also physical dung removal by the beetles. So as far as we can tell at this moment, there are no overall effects of the site of the age of the site, the use of prescribed fire this year or not, or the presence or absence of the bison in the site on the dung beetle abundance or total biomass overall. However, we have noticed some species-specific effects which are kind of exciting. So Untitled Chapter is the smallest beetle species that we're finding in these sites, and there are 2 specific effects for this species. On both of these graphs, the y-axis is the abundance of Knausi that were collected per trap day. The first graph is comparing that abundance against the age of the site, and the second graph is comparing the abundance to the presence or absence of the bison in the sites. So in the first graph, you can see that there's a very strong trend where older sites, including these are the two remnants over here, older sites tend to have many more of these very tiny tunneler dung beetles living in them than the very young sites do. Similarly, sites where the bison are present and grazing have dramatically more Onthophagus knausi than those without. I posit that this may be because the knausi are so small that they have difficulty dispersing to sites where there isn't as reliable a source of resource. We also have a specific effect for one of our other species. Onthophagus hecate is the most common of the species of dung beetles that we're finding in these prairie sites, and there is also a site age effect for this species. However, this time the y-axis of the graph is the average dry mass for all of the Onthophagus hecate encountered in each of those sites, and then compared against the site age. This result definitely surprised me because we see that older sites, including the two remnants over here, tend to have smaller Onthophagus hecate on average than the younger sites do. To look at the dung decomposition assay, you can see the combination of the 4 land management treatments over here. We had sites with the bison present but that were not burned this year, sites with the bison that were burned this year, sites without the bison that were burned this year, and then sites without bison that were unburned this year. But if you look at all 4 of those treatment combinations and the decomposition curves, you can see that they seem to trend pretty much together, and there's no significant difference in the rates of decomposition across the sites versus all of those treatments. Similarly, site age seems to have no effect on the rate of decomposition of the dung that we set out, which means that even the very youngest sites, as soon as they've been restored to something that seems like prairie, they start to act like prairie in terms of this ecosystem function. So it turns out that the restoration management techniques being employed in these tallgrass prairie sites don't seem to be disrupting the overall dung beetle community, which is good news for the land managers, because that means they can make more of their management decisions based on the needs of other organismal groups, and the dung beetles will continue to sort of just do their thing. However, the smallest species does seem to be increasing in abundance with the presence of the bison, and the bison were only reintroduced 3 or 4 years ago, so it'll be interesting to track how that might affect over time with the increased duration of the bison on these sites. There also seems to be a possible selective pressure in older restorations and the oldest sites for smaller beetles, both an increase in the abundance of the smallest beetles we find and the smaller size for the most common beetles we find. So as I continue to analyze my data, we'll have to see if that trend becomes even more dramatic. Also, the functional decomposition of dung in the site seems to not be affected in any negative way by the restoration management techniques. So again, good news for the land managers that they can keep restoring the prairie, focusing on other organismal groups. So with that, I'd really like to thank all of the people who work at Syste because they put up with us stomping around in their prairie. I'd also like to thank all of my field research assistants and my funding sources, and now I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does that mean when it was reseeded in the prairie?
Yes, so they take all of these sites, and some of them had lain fallow, some of them are coming directly from crop rotations, so they are all put into a crop for a year, and then the crop is removed, and then they are seeded with the prairie.
And so, based on that age when they were reseeded, or when that restoration treatment started, what was the interval that fire was applied as a management tool?
So the fire seems to be applied on sort of an every other year basis. That is sort of conditional based on the weather conditions and the wind in the spring when they're doing the burning. But ideally, the way this experiment will continue is that this past summer, half of my sites were burned, and this coming summer, the other half will be burned. So we'll sort of have we'll be able to compare each site against itself, both burned and unburned. Yes?
I'm curious, do you know if some of your dung beetles are more generalists or specialists? That could also explain why there's an increase in this volume.
Yeah. So the question was if they're generalists or specialists in terms of the species, and we're not really sure. There isn't a whole lot of literature on most of the species we found out here, which is exciting and upsetting at the same time. So I would like to look at that in the future. I'm going to guess it goes to the return list. So. Thank you.